So when you're solving a quadratic, it's not all that complicated. One of the things that, in one case, it can actually be pretty easy to solve. So right here, when you have no b term, when you just have ax squared in c, the best way to do this is actually using square roots, okay? And so just take the square root and multiply of both sides, simplify the radical, make sure you put plus and minus on the outside. Okay, so for our first one, we have x squared minus 64. I don't have to go through and factor. I can get the x by itself. So I can actually add 64 to each side. So I have x squared equals 64. Now, the question is, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to take the square root of each side, but you have to remember that there are two possibilities for this number right here. I could plug in positive 8 or I could plug in negative 8. And so my answer is actually going to be plus or minus 8. Okay, so don't forget this. Okay, don't forget your plus or minus. You have two solutions. Okay, and we'll talk about that, the reasoning behind that. Okay, for this one here, I would add 9 because I want to get my x squared by itself. So that's going to be 2x squared is equal to 64. Divide by 2. X squared is equal to 32. Then you take the square root. So x is equal to plus or minus radical 32. Now you need to make sure you simplify the radical. So in this case, 32, if I go through, divided by 2 is 16, divided by 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4, divided by 2 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. So I know that I'm going to take, this is going to be plus or minus, I'm going to take two 2's out, and I'm left with radical 32. I'm left with a 2 on the inside. And so it's going to be x is equal to plus or minus 4 radical 2. Let's try this again with a couple others. So I'm just going to do just 2 more examples for this because I'm trying to make these a little bit shorter. For this one, I would subtract 1 because I want to get my x squared by itself. It's equal to negative 40. I multiply each side by negative 2. These would divide out. I'd end up with just a 1 here because negative 2 times negative 1/2 is 1, or just x squared is equal to positive 80. Then I take the square root of each side. X is equal to plus or minus radical 80, and I just have to simplify. 80 divided by 2 is 40, 40 divided by 2 is 20, 20 divided by 2 is 10, 10 divided by 2 is 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I have 2 2's on the outside, a radical 5 on the inside. So it's going to be plus or minus 4 radical 5. Let's just try one more. Okay, this one here, I subtract 15 from each side. So this is going to be 4x squared. Negative 9 minus 15 is going to be negative 24. I divide by 4, divide by 4. X squared is equal to negative 6. I take the square root of each side. X is equal to plus or minus radical negative 6. You cannot have a negative underneath a radical there, so what you need to make sure you do is you take an I out. I can't simplify 6 anymore, so x is going to be equal to plus or minus I radical 6. I'm going to do this one over here just to show you what I mean. I'm going to subtract 81 from each side. X squared equals negative 81. Take the square root of each side. X is equal to plus or minus radical negative 81. 81, some of you guys know the square root of 81 is 9, but I also have to remember that I have my I here. So I know it's going to be plus or minus. I know that there's going to be an I in my answer. 81 divided by 3 is 27, divided by 3 is 9, divided by 3 is 3, divided by 3 is 1. So I know it's going to be 2 3s on the outside. But those of you that know the shortcut, your answer here would just be 9i. So don't forget the I if there's a negative underneath your radical. Okay. So beyond that, we're going to go through, because I wanted to show you the difference between these ones and then solving quadratics using factoring, where you have to set it equal to 0 first. So what you have to do is you get this add or subtract to set the quadratic equal to 0, factor, set each factor equal to 0, and solve, much like we did last class. So the first thing here, because this has a b term, so a bx, okay, something before the x, you have to do this a little bit differently. So this is going to be 2x squared minus 5x is equal to 0. That's the first thing you do, is you set it equal to 0. For this one, because there's only 2 terms, I'm going to find the common factor. Common factor is x. So 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. Then I take my factors and I set them equal to 0. So x is equal to 0, or 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. This one I have to solve. X is equal to 5 halves. And so my solutions are 0 and 5 halves. Okay, let's try a few more. So I don't want to overwhelm you. I guess I'll just do these 3. So for this one, I would subtract 4. So this would be x squared plus 10x plus 25 is equal to 0. Then I would go through and I would factor. I'd have to go through and factor this one because I have 3 terms. I can't combine any of my like terms. So this is x squared and 25. I look for the 2 numbers that go here and here. I know they multiply to be 25, 1 times 25, and they add to be 10. It's going to be 5 and 5. So this is going to be 5x and 5x. Greatest common factor here is x. Greatest common factor here is 5. X times x is x squared. X times 5x is 5. So my factors are going to be x plus 5 and x plus 5. Now remember, we are solving, so we had set that equal to 0. So I set my factors equal to 0. X plus 5 equals 0. And I actually only have to do this once. So in this case, I'm only going to have one solution. And my solution is going to be -5. I'll do these 2 more. If you feel like you have this down, you're more than welcome to stop the video. This one here, okay, I got to move everything over next to the x squared. So I'm going to subtract x. So this is going to be 2x squared minus x is equal to 21. I'm going to subtract 21. 2x squared minus x minus 21 is equal to 0. Okay, now I factor. All right. I put my 2x squared in here, -21 here. Now I have to figure out 2 numbers. This is going to be 2 times -21. They multiply to be -42 and add to be -1, okay, because my b term is -1. I'm going to give this away. It's going to be -7 and +6. You can use Desmos to find these. So this is going to be -7x and 6x. My greatest common factor here is 2x. This is going to be x. My greatest common factor here, I have a -7, so I'm going to factor out a negative. So this ends up being a -7. Here, 2 times 3 is 6x. So my factored form is going to be 2x minus 7 times x plus 3 is equal to 0. I set each factor equal to 0. 2x minus 7 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. I add 7. 2x equals 7. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. X is equal to 7 halves, and that's a fine answer. Minus 3, x equals -3. And so x is going to be equal to -3 and 7 halves, or +3.5. This last one, okay, so sometimes you're going to have to combine like terms when you're moving stuff over. So I have a -1x and a -1x. I can combine these. So this is 4x squared minus 12x equals -9. That's 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 0. Okay, so I get everything on one side. So I just add or subtract. So I added 9, subtracted, make sure you combine your like terms. So I have 4x squared, and I have 9. I look for two numbers that multiply to be whatever 4 times 9 is, which is 36, and add to be negative 12. That's going to be negative 6x and negative 6x. Okay, you can use Desmos to figure those out. I find the greatest common factor of these, which is going to be a 2x. Okay, greatest common factor here is going to be a negative 3. 2 goes into 4 2 times. X is x squared. 2 goes into negative 6, negative 3 times. So this is going to be 2x minus 3 times 2x minus 3 equals 0. I only have to solve one of these. 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. Add 3. 2x is equal to 3. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. X is equal to 3 halves, or 1 1/2.